time to look at some anti-racist voodoo. Now, are you guys dedicated anti-racists? Do you eat your vitamins? Do you say your prayers in the morning to Saint Floyd? Do you have his image above your bathroom mirror so that you can get out of the shower and you can say a little quick word to him?
Actually, it is in the bathroom.
You've got his image somewhere in there, don't you? I bet. Well, I just thought it was interesting because I thought there are all of these symbols and totems almost that are treated with this religious air of respect and as though they have energy imbued within them, evil and positive energy, and they have to have the appropriate, worshipping for the positives, destruction of the negative. Yeah. And I thought it really just reminds me of voodoo. Almost. It's this really strange attitude where we need to venerate these benign objects, which is certainly not something that I'm particularly familiar with. So,
we've got a counsellor that loves doing that, doesn't he?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I thought it would be interesting to go through some examples of that, talk about the actual backstories, shall we say, to some of these big race narratives that exploded out of America and led to organisations like BLM, who we've already discussed today. Because when you start to dig into these narratives, they really don't hold up. No. They really do not hold up. But before I go any further, we've got premium content on the website that we really want you to watch. This one's a recent one. Epochs, which is Bo's series, which he a lot of the time has Carl on, and they've been going through the Assyrian Empire. This is part 4, so if you really want a good deep dive into the Assyrian Empire, we've got hours worth of content on that right now, so you can please sign up for the website. £5 a month for just our basic membership that gives you access to all of the content that we've got on there, and we do put a lot of work into this, and we really want you to watch it, so please consider signing up for a membership. Anyway, so the first thing that really got me thinking about this was this absolutely ridiculous news story that I found where everybody remembers Derek Chauvin, the big boogeyman, Derek Chauvin, the most evil man to have ever lived who didn't have a funny mustache. He was, of course, the person who was involved in the George Floyd incident. He went down for the murder of George Floyd. I think it was triple counts of murder, or third-degree murder, or something like that. And I don't know how much of the story that you guys are aware of. I'm sure that you've probably looked into it and know what actually happened. But if you go back and watch the content that we were putting out on YouTube at the time, Callum was watching all of the trial as it was going down and basically found that this media narrative around it was obvious nonsense. And what actually happened was Chauvin hadn't just, knelt down and choked this guy out for no particular reason. Not that you can choke somebody from the back of the neck anyway. The very fact that people bought that in the first place is just a damning indictment of the school system. But what actually happened, of course, was that St. George had taken quite a bit of fentanyl, which was laced with methamphetamine, overdosed, and the involvement of the police and also the large crowd that gathered around, meaning that the ambulance couldn't get to them and had to park a block or two over, meant that he just died there and then. So that was interesting, but despite that truth, obviously, we all know that what actually happened in reality was that Derek Chauvin is the most evil man who ever lived, and as such, all of his possessions that he had as a police officer when it went down have been cursed forevermore, including the badge number that he had, which meant that no future officer will wear Derek Chauvin's badge number ever again. And they say here in the Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara says former officer Derek Chauvin's badge number will never be used again. He made the comments after on Thursday after the city council settled 2 civil cases against Chauvin for $9 million. So it seems that what's happened is after he was put in prison, they have then opened up Pandora's box for any minor infraction or any side eye that he gave somebody in the past. They're now throwing lawsuits at the police department. The police department's paying up millions each time because Derek Chauvin, nothing, he could tie his shoelaces in the morning, he would do it in a bad and evil manner. Everything that he's ever done has always been negative. And they even say here, the Minneapolis police have a tradition to recycle the badge numbers that are no longer assigned to a police officer, current officer. This badge, betrayed and so egregiously dishonoured, we need to get the religious language in there, the dishonourable language, will be destroyed. So they're not just getting rid of the number, they're taking his badge and ritualistically destroying it.
Are they going to have a ceremony as well? Is there?
Yeah.
Are they going to have like a fire pit and dance
melt
around
it?
Yeah, I was imagining they'll be dancing around, they'll have robes on, there'll be chants, it seems very once again, a little bit of voodoo.
Yeah,
To me. And he said the Minneapolis mayor said Jacob Frey said the fact that no other officer will wear the badge is a symbol, but an important one. Yes, we know. We can tell. We can tell all of this is symbolic nonsense to make sure that everybody knows you do not mess with this narrative.
Yeah.
You can't say a word against this narrative. We even burnt his effigy at the stake. We're going to Guy Fawkes this guy every year from now on, so that you know he's the bad guy.
Although, strangely enough, I think in this country, if you are slayed in the act of your, the performance of your duty, the badge is never used again anyway. In this country, we treat it as a hero.
I mean, that would be...
So he's a hero.
Well, he's a hero, but we don't destroy them either. So
no, we don't destroy them.
That's the problem. And you know that anti-racism is the new civic religion of the US, because you get things like the George Floyd sculpture in New York City. When if you go to the next one, John, just so we can remind us of the beautiful visage. It didn't even happen in New York City.
No.
New York, it happened miles away in Minneapolis. New York just felt the need to let everybody know that we also pray at the altar of St. Floyd.
Yeah.
And then I saw this on Twitter, which is very, very interesting. A tweet that I thought, honestly, at first was a parody. I thought it was a joke. Everybody, do you remember the name Trayvon Martin? Have you heard of the story? Murdered by George Zimmerman in cold blood, and he was acquitted and he got off for no reason. And this Trayvon Martin, being another symbol of the institutional racism of the US, his flight suit that I'd never heard of before. Apparently, he did some kind of opportunity years and years ago where he had a flight suit given to him, is now on display at the Smithsonian's Natural Museum of African American History. Can you believe that?
It's just rewriting everything, and the George Floyd stuff. I don't know why people aren't questioning. All you need to do is look at that man's rap sheet and ask yourself, is the world a better place? And I would say it is.
Yeah, it is.
Because what that guy had done, George Floyd, is you should not be on the streets.
I heard that he'd been turning himself around. I heard that he'd been turning his life around, which is why he was going around high as a kite in the middle of a 7-Eleven in the middle of the day, handing in counterfeit notes. Nothing is to say that he deserved to die or anything.
No.
But just saying that it wasn't Chauvin's fault that he died in the first place.
No, absolutely not. But it's been allowed to be painted in that way. Like how many Americans know his badge number? How many would know that if it was, just put a random number and just say we're taking that out? Who would know? Who cares about this sort of thing? I bet most Americans, they couldn't give a stuff if someone uses his badge number.
Actually, I'll bet that's a nice little earner if you started doing a replica of his badge.
Oh, yeah. But I thought this was a joke at first, this Trayvon Martin thing, but it's not.
No.
It's actually not. If you go to the next article, from the Smithsonian's Museum itself, it's got objects from Outcast, Octavia Butler, and Marvel's Black Panther on display in the National Museum of African American History and Culture's new Afrofuturism exhibition. This is Afrofuturism, a history of black futures. It seems more like a history of wish fulfillment, as far as I'm concerned, because you are literally putting up fictional things like the Black Panther costume worn by Chadwick Boseman. Now, they do have some things that I'm actually all right with being displayed in a museum. For instance, Vernon Reid's guitar, if you've ever listened to Living Colour, great band. I'm fine with that. George Clinton's wig from Parliament Funkadelic. I love Parliament Funkadelic. I'm fine with these things being displayed in a museum. But then Trayvon Martin's flight suit from Experience Aviation. It sounds as though he might have taken an experience day at a space place, and they've just decided this is now an integral part of American cultural history.
Yeah, but isn't this a symbol across the whole world? They're trying to dig up things that actually didn't happen and attribute them. We had the Royal Mint the other year, Black History, and half of it was a load of cobblers.
Of course it is. They try and find... You've got court historians, BBC types like David Olusoga, who wrote that book Black and British, which if you actually read through much of it, it's going to be talking primarily, and most of that book is going to be talking about, did you know that we had race riots in Liverpool in 1919? All from that point. Anything before then is going to be like a diplomat from a North African country visited the country for a weekend one time in the Tudor era and then immediately went home. Or you end up with things like there's that tapestry where I think it's a tapestry or painting where one of the bannermen playing a horn is black.
Yeah.
And it was such an unusual thing that we're still pointing to it now as evidence that there was apparently a multiracial, multi-ethnic culture in here. No, that's the reason we could only point to things like that and one or two other instances in the past 1,000 years before Windrush.
Yes.
It's because this just isn't a part of UK British history. And in America, obviously they have their own history with slavery, Jim Crow laws and other such things. But that's not the entirety of American history. But this is all an attempt to reframe all of American history from this very particular perspective as a way of, once again, humiliating people in the here and now for crimes that their ancestors from decades, if not hundreds of years ago, may or may not have committed in the first place. And there was more on this. They've had displays related to Trayvon Martin before. Trayvon Martin to Emmett Till. And this is where I wanted to get into a little of the backstory, because they give the story of Trayvon Martin here, what I would call the court story of Trayvon Martin, where they mention on February 26th in 2012 in Sanford, Florida, Martin was returning to his father's house after a trip to the store, famously from buying some Skittles, when he was confronted by a member of the Neighborhood Watch, George Zimmerman. During the altercation, the unarmed 17-year-old high school student was shot and killed. Charged with second-degree murder, the Neighborhood Watch volunteer claimed self-defense, and on July 13th, 2013, a jury found him not guilty. The decision sparked protests decrying the results, and that was the big start of Black Lives Matter. That's where you got people like Patrisse Cullors coming out of the primordial ooze and deciding that I'm now a cultural figurehead, I'm going to be the leader of a movement. That's where you get all of these organizations popping out from. And when put like that, it seems almost reasonable. Well, he was just coming back from the store from buying some Skittles, and he was just murdered for no particular reason. Obviously, this must be an injustice that needs to be righted, but that's not true.
Yeah.
Parts of the story are true, but then the second you start to look into it, it all falls apart. And this was enough, apparently, to justify displaying the clothing and other items in possession of Trayvon Martin when he was fatally shot. Sorry, if I was fatally shot, I don't want you stripping my body of the clothes and then putting them up in a museum. I think, what did I do? What have I done that's wrong, guys? I mean, that's the sort of thing that you lead to.
What happened to the Skittles?
Maybe they're still in there. They're still in date. I'm a bit peckish right now. And that's the sort of thing you either leave to great heroes, war heroes, or great villains. That's not the sort of thing you just do for some kid who managed to get himself shot. And once again, this isn't the actual story. If you're watching this and you've only ever heard the court story, I had only really heard the court story, but I knew, let's be honest, we all know whenever we hear one of these narratives these days that there's going to be a lot more to it than whatever the mainstream media is reporting. But I saw this in the quote tweets from a man called Indian Bronson saying Trayvon Martin deserved it. Clear-cut self-defense. He was a violent criminal. And I thought, seems a bit harsh. Okay, what's going on here? Best look into it. And then if we go to the next one, he linked a few articles in this, and I thought I would take a look at what some of the articles say. So the first one that he linked was this next one from the time in 2012, where NBC had to let out an apology that they edited the Trayvon Martin tape to make George Zimmerman sound racist, George Zimmerman being the man who killed him, where the original transcript of the audio they played was Zimmerman saying, "This guy looks like he's up to no good. He looks black because he called up the police because he was a neighborhood watch." And they reported, he just looks black, therefore he's up to no good. What he actually said was, this guy looks like he's up to no good, or he's on drugs or something. It's raining and he's just walking around looking about. The dispatcher says, okay, and this guy, is he black, white, or Hispanic? Zimmerman says he looks black. So they obviously cut out a lot of context there, as the media loves to do.
Yeah.
And then in the next article, which was also shared by this person, they say here that ABC News broadcast the story reporting the police surveillance video showed no evidence that Zimmerman suffered abrasions or bled during the confrontation with Trayvon, which, of course, if you were going by the court judgment, by the jury judgment, would mean that his self-defense story was nonsense. He had no abrasions on him. He wasn't hurt. Nothing went on. Except shortly thereafter, it clarified the situation, reporting that an enhanced version of the video showed Zimmerman with an injury to the back of his head. And I found this other one from an ABC report in 2012 saying that this is a different one. Sorry, I didn't include this link, John, so I'll just read this out. A medical report compiled by the family physician of Trayvon Martin shooter George Zimmerman and obtained exclusively by ABC News found that Zimmerman was diagnosed with a closed fracture on his nose, a pair of black eyes, 2 lacerations to the back of his head, and a minor back injury the day after he fatally shot Martin during an alleged altercation. So what it seems to me has happened is, rightly or wrongly, he confronted Trayvon Martin because he's neighborhood watch, maybe took it into himself to figure out what's going on, why are you around our neighborhood, you're messing up the place, you look like you're on drugs or something. Martin decided to just attack him. Obviously, this is just going off the information that I can see here. And then eventually had to shoot him in self-defense because apparently in the court hearing as what was going on, George Zimmerman stated that what happened was he was having his head smashed against the pavement, so he had to pull the gun and shoot him in the chest to get him off him. As self-defense, he ends up dying. Media reports it, he just shot him because he was black. He was just black. He was shot by some guy who just hated him because he was just there black. And now this justifies showing the clothes that he was wearing when he was shot in the Smithsonian Museum so that everybody in the country can know this is what your country is. This is what your country was founded on. These clothes hold an aura. They hold a magic to them, which you need to absorb into your very bones.
It's absolutely crazy, isn't it? Because, like you said, it is the rewriting of history. Like 100 years' time, what are they going to say about that suit? Are they going to say that this, young potential pilot, was taken so young because of his comeback back in the race wars of 2012?
We'd have colonized Pluto by now if it hadn't been for that damn Zimmerman.
Exactly, but it is the reframing of facts, and that's the what's concerning, because it goes on in schools. When BLM came out, no teachers were rushing to the defense or rushing to tell the facts of the case, tell people who George Floyd actually was, what he did, what his record was, or give any context to it. All they point at is, look how racist America is. Look how racist Britain is. And that's the angle. That's what
you're right, because our history is then immediately folded into their new history, and we're just the exact same as America always has been, despite the fact that we share a much longer and richer history than America has.
And we've got occasions.
And we've never had segregation.
And we've had occasions where we've actually fought in defence of black people. There's a very famous case in when the Americans were over here, and the American white soldiers did not want to have drinks with the black soldiers in a pub in Devon. That's where they were massing for.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And the locals said, you're barred to the white ones unless you mix. Simple. So we've got that, and it's called the British fairness. When we see something unfair, we usually deal with it. Now it's in reverse. It is a simmering pot, is Britain, because of the influx of migration into this country. It's too much, too quick, and it needs to stop. And it will race over. And the problem is with Wales Online and other newspapers in this country, they're painting exactly the same thing as what you're pointing to now. It's a different narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. And it happens in real time in front of our very eyes. And the most distressing thing for me is that people just go along with it. Like one of the other articles that I pointed to before, the one that was talking about Trayvon Martin's, the first exhibition where they were displaying his clothes, mentioned Emmett Till. And everybody these days has heard the story of Emmett Till in the 1950s and 1954. It insults a white woman at a cashier and then ends up getting kidnapped and murdered by her husband and some other people. Horrible story. Obviously did not deserve what happened to him. No one would justify that. But what happened was that nobody really cared or knew about that story beyond the local community that it happened in until about the early 2000s, when the story started to get picked up again so that it could be reframed as one of the inciting incidents of American racism, despite the fact that it was coming right at the end of when the Jim Crow era laws were going to get repealed. These people, the Jim Crow era laws were not repealed because everybody heard about Emmett Till and what happened to him, but they want to repaint it as, look at how white supremacist America is, look at how evil everything that white people in America do, and Emmett Till is now going to be the face of your shame. He will be the face of your guilt. Once again, this voodoo magic that you need to imbibe into yourself. And the last one that I saw here, on the Smithsonian Museum, because I just decided to take a little bit of a look around, was they had a Breonna Taylor portrait featured in new exhibition at National Museum. Scroll down so we can see this, and this was back in 2021. So there's Breonna Taylor. Do you know the story of Breonna Taylor? Because there is the two stories. There's the media story and the one that was spread on social media, and that I still see people spread on social media. Then there's what actually happened. So according to social media, not that you should ever believe much that you read on social media, you should always vet any story you see on social media. What I always see is that police were going around hers to serve a no-knock warrant. They broke into her house at night when she was sleeping and shot her in her bed. Does this sound like a believable story to you?
No.
No, it doesn't. But people believe it anyway, because what actually happened was she was staying at her boyfriend's apartment. Her boyfriend, who was a drug dealer, they were supposed to serve a no-knock warrant. The police knocked instead, and her boyfriend woke up, got his gun, thought it was some rival drug dealers or something, started opening fire at the police. They returned fire. Breonna Taylor gets up and does what any intelligent person would do and walks towards the sound of gunfire. And then gets caught in the crossfire. Terrible thing that happened to her, but is not the same story that is being painted and pushed by those in control of media narratives. And it's absolutely ridiculous. And everybody loses at the end of the day when it comes to stories like this. Nobody comes out looking good. Nothing good happens when somebody is dead at the end of the story. But there is one person who makes an absolute killing, no pun intended, from all of these tragedies that do happen. And that is a man called Benjamin Crump, who Connor made me aware of, who is the civil rights attorney who decides to show up every single one of these cases that comes up and always represents the family.
Offender.
Yeah, the offender or the family. So he represented, among others, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd's family, Trayvon Martin's family, Michael Brown's family, Tyre Nichols' family. Tyre Nichols was the guy who was killed by the 5 black Memphis police officers earlier on this year, where the media was really, they had a hard time reporting the police officers were black who beat him up.
But it was white legacy, wasn't it? White.
Oh yeah, it was. There were probably more black faces of white supremacy, just like Larry Elder in LA. You know how these things go. But it's absolutely ridiculous that all of these things happen. America is malformed and deformed so that everybody can know how evil it is. Whereas men like this probably make who knows how much money off of the back of all of it. So yeah, there's my little story of anti-racist voodoo.
We hope you enjoyed that segment from the podcast of Lotus Eaters. If you did, you can go to our website where you can get the podcast in full, uncensored, and for free, as well as paying as little as £5 a month to get access to all of our extra premium content. For example, this video presentation I did on how real communism has already been tried, looking at the texts and history of Marxism. And if you'd like to see all the rest of the content that we're putting out, you can follow us at LotusEaters_com on Twitter and on Getter. Until next time, goodbye.